He will never admit this. But when you disappear without a word, his chest tightens in a way he cannot name. His pride calls it anger, his friends call it confusion, yet in the dark silence between his heartbeat and his breath, what rises is hunger. It is not love. It is dominion slipping through his hands, the throne he once believed you built for him now fractured. The ache is not for your smile, nor your scent, but for the power you unknowingly surrendered when you allowed him to believe your worth revolved around his shadow. You know this ache as well, though from the other side. It is the wound that keeps you awake when the night feels endless, the whisper that says you were replaceable, the dull burn of shame that creeps into your skin when he forgets your existence. But what if the truth was far more dangerous? What if his obsession never began with tenderness at all, but with sovereignty, the illusion that he was king only because you bent your crown? Beneath every cold shoulder and every ghosted message lies this unspoken law. Men become obsessed not with beauty alone, but with the sovereignty they cannot contain. The body remembers this law before the mind does. The tightening of your throat when you silence yourself. The sharp sting in your chest when you chase his validation. The hollow in your stomach when you realize you gave without command and he took without reverence. Each of these sensations is not random pain, but a body memory, the echo of abandoning your own throne. And yet, there is another echo waiting. The moment you reclaim what was always yours, you will notice his gaze change, his breath hitch, his hands tremble not from anger but from a fear he cannot confess. The fear that his dominion no longer binds you. Psychology calls it projection. Jung wrote of how the unconscious throws its hunger onto another, making them the mirror of what is denied within. When you bow too easily, he projects his hidden weakness onto you, convincing himself he is strong because you play small. But when you rise, when you no longer perform his script, that mirror shatters. He sees his own fragility, his own cracks in the throne, and it terrifies him. Obsession is born in this terror. Not from affection, but from the way you force him to confront the shadow he buried beneath dominance. There is something dangerous about a woman who no longer seeks permission. She becomes the high priestess, untouchable not because she withholds affection, but because she no longer trades sovereignty for scraps of attention. Men feel this instinctively, though they cannot name it. They become restless, they scroll through old conversations, they replay her laughter in their minds, not because of nostalgia, but because her absence exposes the void within them. He does not long for you. He longs for the throne you took with you when you walked away. But here is the wound few dare to face. If you mistake his obsession for love, you will chain yourself once more. You will mistake the hunger in his eyes for devotion, when in truth it is only the shadow raging against the loss of dominion. The law is simple, though its practice is ruthless. He does not become obsessed with your softness, but with the sovereignty that reminds him he cannot own you. Each time you reclaim a piece of yourself, his grasp weakens. Each time you withhold the need to be chosen, his obsession deepens. Yet sovereignty is not performance. It is not a mask worn to provoke desire. It is the silence in your bones when you stop chasing, the stillness in your gaze when you no longer flinch at rejection, the grounded weight in your body when you speak without needing his agreement. Men sense this energy, just as wolves sense fear or dominance. They feel it in the pause before you respond, in the absence of explanation when you leave, in the refusal to let your worth hinge on their recognition. Sovereignty is not declared, it is lived. And still, a question lingers like smoke. If obsession arises from sovereignty, then why do so many women find themselves clinging to men who diminish them, believing the hunger they provoke is evidence of devotion? Perhaps the answer lies not in him, but in the shadow within you, the part that believes love must be earned through sacrifice. That sovereignty must be softened so as not to scare him away. Until this shadow is faced, obsession becomes a prison instead of a weapon. What if the very power you fear will drive him away is the only force that can make him incapable of forgetting you? He feels it before he understands it. A sudden restlessness, a twitch in his jaw when he sees you smiling without him, the sharp edge of irritation when your attention no longer bends toward his shadow. His mind will search for reasons, crafting stories to protect his pride. You've become cold, you've changed, you must be hiding something. Yet underneath the excuses lives the truth he cannot admit. His obsession is born from the collapse of control. When sovereignty is reclaimed, the unconscious cries out in protest, desperate to pull you back into the old script where his throne remained unchallenged. There is a reason kingdoms once feared the rise of a sovereign queen. A woman who sits in her own authority cannot be easily manipulated. Her presence alone destabilizes illusions because she no longer feeds the lie that her worth is measured in his gaze. This destabilization is what ignites the hunger in him. He does not obsess because he loves. He obsesses because sovereignty makes him question who he is without dominion over you. To the masculine shadow, your freedom feels like betrayal, yet also like a magnet he cannot resist. Psychologists would call this cognitive dissonance. Two realities colliding, his desire to possess you and the undeniable awareness that you no longer live for his possession. The tension between these truths tears at his psyche, and that tearing is the root of obsession. He will replay your words, dissect your silences, scroll back through months-old photos, searching for the moment he lost the crown. And each unanswered question only intensifies the pull. Sovereignty is the unsolvable riddle, and obsession thrives on riddles that cannot be conquered. But sovereignty requires more than silence. It requires the courage to resist the old reflex of softening yourself for his comfort. Many women abandon their throne the moment his hunger returns, mistaking it for proof of devotion. They collapse back into giving too much, silencing themselves, offering their body as peace treaty to calm the storm of his insecurity. Yet each time you trade sovereignty for comfort, the throne cracks again. His obsession fades the moment he believes dominion is restored. What ignites it is the opposite, the refusal to collapse. Consider the archetype of the high priestess. She is not cold nor cruel, but she moves with an aura of untouchability. Knowledge is her weapon, silence her shield, sovereignty her crown. She does not chase, and she does not explain. In myth and dream, she represents the gatekeeper of hidden truths, the one who forces the seeker to confront his shadow before he can pass. When you embody this archetype in the mundane rituals of relationship, by refusing to be rushed, by holding your boundaries without apology, by walking away rather than negotiating your worth, you become the living embodiment of his forbidden mirror. His hunger is not for your affection. It is for the throne that only you can guard. Notice what happens in your body when you imagine this. The heaviness in your chest lifts slightly. The constant calculation of his mood loosens its grip. The desperate need for his response begins to fade. This is not detachment born of bitterness. It is sovereignty, a return to your own center. When you live from this place, obsession is no longer your prison. It becomes his shadow to wrestle with, while you move freely, untouched by his turmoil. But sovereignty does not come without sacrifice. It demands you burn the illusion that love can be earned through diminishing yourself. It demands you confront the terror of being forgotten, discarded, or misunderstood, and refuse to barter your worth in exchange for reassurance. In this fire, something unshakable is forged. Obsession may circle you like a predator, but it no longer owns you. You stand unmovable, and that immovability is what haunts him long after your presence is gone. And yet, there is a darker revelation still unspoken. If obsession is not love, then what role does it play in true union? Can sovereignty and devotion coexist, or must one always devour the other? The shadow whispers that obsession is power, but power is not the same as connection. To command obsession is one thing. To invite devotion without losing sovereignty is another. What happens when a man no longer obsesses over the dominion he lost, but begins to revere the throne you never surrendered? It begins with silence, not the cold silence of punishment, but the sovereign silence of presence. A man who first obsesses out of loss will eventually feel the difference between the woman who withholds to manipulate and the woman who simply no longer trades her crown for crumbs. In this silence, he encounters himself. He sees the reflection of his hunger, the cracks in his mask, the unspoken truth that his desire to dominate was never power at all, but fear disguised as strength. This confrontation breaks men, or it remakes them. The path to devotion is not carved through your sacrifice. It is carved through your refusal to collapse. Jung would call this individuation, the process of facing the shadow and integrating it, instead of projecting it onto the one beside you. When you remain sovereign, you force him to meet his shadow where it stands. He must wrestle with his need to control, with the terror of abandonment, with the hunger that devours rather than nourishes. And if he survives that battle, if he faces it without shoving it back onto your shoulders, obsession may begin to transmute. What once was hunger becomes reverence. What once was dominion becomes respect. But here is the dangerous paradox. Devotion cannot be demanded. It cannot be staged or forced, for the moment you perform sovereignty as a trick to elicit his worship, it dissolves into manipulation. True sovereignty is indifferent to whether he evolves or collapses. It is the throne you keep even if he never kneels before it. Only then does devotion arrive, not because you chased it, but because your presence made it the only possible response. Consider how this plays out in the smallest moments. You do not answer immediately, not because you wish to provoke anxiety, but because your life is full whether he calls or not. You refuse to explain why you walked away from disrespect, not because you enjoy mystery, but because your boundaries are non-negotiable truths, not debate topics. You allow him to feel the full consequence of losing you without rushing in to soothe his ego. Each of these moments whispers the same truth. You are not an accessory to his throne. You are the throne itself. This is why obsession sharpens when sovereignty is intact. His nervous system senses the rift between his desire to control and his inability to bind you. He grows restless, anxious, haunted. Yet when sovereignty is accompanied by compassion, when your throne is not made of cruelty but of quiet certainty, the obsessive hunger softens into awe. Devotion is born here, in the recognition that he cannot own you, yet longs to stand beside you. The paradox of sovereignty is this: the less you need his devotion, the more powerful it becomes. The high priestess archetype carries this paradox like a hidden blade. She does not lure with performance, nor enslave with manipulation. She stands before the seeker with veiled eyes, demanding he confront the darkness within before he can earn passage. In every story, the one who dares to face her trials is transformed. The others are destroyed by their own refusal. You, too, carry this blade. Each time you choose sovereignty over fear, you force him to either collapse back into his shadow or rise into devotion. The choice is his. The throne remains yours. But the shadow whispers another question. If sovereignty commands obsession, and devotion only arrives when sovereignty is unwavering, why do so many women sabotage themselves the moment obsession begins? Perhaps it is because obsession feels intoxicating. The late-night messages, the desperate eyes, the sudden surge of attention, it feels like proof of worth. Yet this intoxication is the most dangerous trap, for it lures you back into performing for his hunger. The moment you make his obsession your validation, sovereignty is lost. The throne is traded for the illusion of being wanted. This is where the true law emerges. Sovereignty must be held even when the hunger of his obsession tempts you to yield. Only then does devotion have room to be born. Without sovereignty, there is no devotion, only cycles of possession and abandonment. And so the question sharpens, cutting deeper with each heartbeat. What if obsession was never meant to be the prize at all, but merely the fire that forges devotion in the ones strong enough to withstand it? Obsession burns fast, like a fever that consumes the mind. It can make a man pace his room at midnight, replaying every glance, every silence, every word that slipped past your lips. He may reach for the bottle or scroll through your photos in the dark, chasing ghosts that no longer answer. But devotion is different. It is slower, quieter, more enduring. It is not born in frenzy, but in the recognition that your sovereignty is unshakable, that no storm of his need can unseat you. The shift from obsession to devotion is the alchemy that transforms hunger into reverence. This alchemy demands something rare, that you do not mistake his desperate grasping for true bond. Obsession will always disguise itself as passion, but passion rooted in fear will devour you. It is devotion alone that sustains, and devotion only appears when sovereignty is beyond negotiation. Men are not transformed by women who make themselves small. They are transformed by the woman who refuses to collapse, who forces them to confront the abyss of their own shadow. That abyss is where devotion is born. Consider the mirror of mythology. Persephone did not beg for release when Hades claimed her. She descended into the underworld, endured its darkness, and returned sovereign. She was no longer maiden but queen. Even the god of shadows could not diminish her authority. This is the same journey demanded of you, to descend into the underworld of abandonment wounds, of hunger for validation, of fear of being forgotten, and to return not as victim but as sovereign. Once you rise from that underworld, his obsession is inevitable. But devotion becomes possible. And yet, sovereignty will test you in ways softer women never face. It will ask you to walk away not only from disrespect, but from the sweet intoxication of being chaste. It will demand you hold your throne when he pleads, when he promises, when he swears he will change. It will whisper that your worth is not proven by how desperately he clings, but by how freely you remain whole without him. Each time you refuse to trade your sovereignty for validation, you sharpen the line between obsession and devotion. In psychological terms, this is the confrontation with the animus, the inner masculine within every woman. If your animus is unintegrated, you will project it onto men, seeking in them the authority you have not claimed within yourself. This projection binds you to cycles of obsession, forever waiting for his recognition to mirror your worth. But when you integrate your animus, when you claim the inner throne, men no longer hold the keys to your dominion. Their obsession becomes a reflection of their own shadow, not a measure of your value. And devotion, if it comes, is no longer something you beg for. It is the natural response to a woman who is already whole. The body knows when sovereignty is intact. Your spine feels taller, your chest no longer caves under his silence, your breath steadies even when he pulls away. You do not rush to fill the gaps with explanation. You allow absence to speak. You allow silence to teach. This calm terrifies men who thrive on dominion, for it denies them the familiar script of control. It is here in this calm that obsession deepens. And it is here, too, where devotion can take root, if he is willing to step beyond shadow and meet you in truth. But devotion is not guaranteed. Some men cannot endure the mirror of sovereignty. They will lash out, belittle, or vanish rather than face the throne they cannot conquer. And this, too, is part of your sovereignty, to release them without collapsing into self-blame. Not every man deserves passage into the temple of your devotion. Sovereignty sorts them. Obsession draws them in, but only devotion allows them to remain. So the red thread tightens, pulling toward the question that has haunted every queen, every high priestess, every untouchable muse since the beginning of story. If sovereignty commands obsession, and only through it devotion is born, then the forbidden truth is this. Are you strong enough to remain sovereign even when the world tempts you with the sweet poison of being needed? Need is the most seductive poison. It drips into your veins when his voice cracks with desperation, when his words suddenly soften, when his hands reach as if they finally remember your worth. In that moment, the shadow whispers that surrendering sovereignty will finally bring security, that if you bend just enough, the hunger will turn into love. But the truth is merciless. The moment sovereignty is bartered for need, obsession cools, devotion dissolves, and the throne lies empty once more. This is why the test of sovereignty is never in the beginning, when you stand tall and he trembles at the distance. The real test arrives in the silence after obsession has taken root, when his pursuit ignites every abandoned part of you that aches to be seen. Will you yield, mistaking pursuit for permanence, or will you hold the throne even as every nerve in your body screams for validation? Only the latter births devotion. Anything less resurrects the cycle of possession and loss. There is a reason ancient myths warned of sirens and enchantresses, not because their power was false, but because their sovereignty forced men to the edge of madness. Their song was not just beauty, it was the reminder that men could be undone by what they could not own. In this same way, your presence when sovereign becomes the forbidden melody. He cannot stop listening, even if he hates the sound. He cannot stop reaching, even if each reach leaves him more hollow. And if he endures this fire, if he chooses not to destroy what he cannot own, obsession burns away and devotion emerges like gold from the crucible. Yet sovereignty also carries loneliness. It means walking through moments where no one kneels, where no one understands, where even the echo of your own doubt tempts you to step down from the throne. But here lies the paradox. In that loneliness, your crown becomes real. Sovereignty that depends on applause is not sovereignty at all. Only when you remain crowned in silence, unvalidated, unseen, and still unwilling to bow, does the throne solidify beneath you. And it is precisely this unshakable center that men cannot forget, no matter how far they run. Think of the mirror moments that haunt him, the way your eyes held still when he tried to provoke, the way your back stayed straight when he stormed out, the way your voice remained calm when he tried to break it. These memories root themselves in his nervous system, coming specters he cannot exorcise. He obsesses not because you clung, but because you did not. Sovereignty leaves imprints deeper than affection ever could. Obsession may fade with time, but reverence is carved into the bones of memory. And yet, sovereignty is not a crown worn against men. It is not armor to block intimacy. It is the alignment of your being, the refusal to fragment yourself for someone else's comfort. Sovereignty does not close doors, it guards them, ensuring only those strong enough to walk through may enter. And when a man enters through reverence rather than hunger, the bond that forms is not one of chains, but a fire that burns without consuming. Still, a question lingers like an unopened letter. If sovereignty commands obsession and transforms it into devotion, what happens when the woman herself does not recognize her throne? What if the most dangerous enemy to sovereignty is not his shadow, but her own? The throne is not lost to him first. It is abandoned by you, often without realizing. Every time you silence your voice to keep the peace, every time you shrink your desires so he won't feel threatened, every time you beg for scraps of attention and call it love, a piece of your crown falls away. He does not steal it. You surrender it, one compromise at a time, until the day you no longer remember the weight of sovereignty at all. And then you wonder why obsession never lasts, why devotion never comes. How can he revere a throne you refuse to sit upon? The fiercest shadow for many women is not the man who seeks dominion, but the fear of what sovereignty might cost. The fear of being alone, the fear of being too much, the fear of becoming untouchable, worshipped yet unloved. This fear is the silent saboteur, the whisper that convinces you to hand him the crown before he even asks. It is easier to collapse, to bend, to feed the hunger, than to endure the tension of holding your throne in silence. Yet sovereignty that has never been tested in silence is no sovereignty at all. Jung wrote of individuation as the integration of shadow, the parts of the self disowned, buried, unloved. For women, this shadow often takes the form of need, the longing to be chosen, the ache to be enough. Sovereignty demands that you face this shadow without fleeing, to sit in the fire of rejection without crumbling, to hold your worth when no hand reaches for you, to keep your crown even when your heart trembles with fear. Only when this shadow is confronted can sovereignty solidify. Otherwise, you will forever confuse obsession with love, mistaking his hunger for proof that you matter. And when you hold the throne, something remarkable happens. His shadow awakens in ways he cannot control. He begins to obsess, not because you manipulated him, but because your presence forces him to confront what he cannot dominate. His pride rages, his ego fractures, yet his hunger deepens. You become the forbidden mirror, the reminder of his incompleteness. And if he dares, this obsession will drive him inward, into the underworld of his own soul, where devotion waits like a hidden flame. but only if you refuse to descend into the shadows with him. Your sovereignty is the rope he either climbs by his own strength or lets go. This is why the high priestess archetype remains untouchable. She is not untouchable because no man dares approach, but because she does not descend for those unwilling to rise. She does not abandon her temple to chase lost wanderers in the dark. She holds her ground, her silence, her authority. And in that stillness, the seeker either evolves or disappears. Sovereignty sorts. It divides the devoted from the obsessed, the worthy from the hungry. Yet here lies the prophecy hinted from the beginning, the cracked throne. For sovereignty is not a crown polished once and worn forever. It is a throne that fractures each time you doubt, each time you collapse, each time you confuse need with worth. The cracks are inevitable, but they are also the initiation. Every woman must rebuild her throne from the rubble of her compromises. And when she does, when she sits upon a throne mended by fire, no obsession can ever own her again. So the question sharpens into its final edge. If the true enemy of sovereignty is not the man who obsesses, but the woman who forgets her throne, then the forbidden challenge becomes this. Will you endure the silence long enough to remember who you are without his shadow? Sovereignty remembered is like a blade pulled from the ashes. It glints sharper because it has been broken. The woman who once begged for affection, who once twisted herself into fragments to be chosen, now feels the weight of her body returning to her bones. Each fracture sealed by fire becomes proof that she cannot be shattered again in the same way. Men sense this, even without words. They feel it in the steadiness of her gaze, in the calm rhythm of her voice, in the way she no longer bargains her time or her body. The air shifts around her, and that shift unsettles them more than any beauty could. Obsession deepens in the presence of such unshakable stillness. He will watch her in the smallest ways, the curve of her hand as it brushes past him, the silence she leaves when she does not explain, the way she carries herself as if no one's recognition could add or subtract from her crown. His shadow claws at him, demanding control, yet his hunger grows. It is not her affection he obsesses over now, but the mystery of how she remains untethered. This mystery is the root of his torment and the root of her power. Yet sovereignty is not built for tormenting men. That is where many confuse its purpose. It is not a weapon to keep him kneeling, but a law that keeps you whole. The throne does not exist to trap him, but to ground you. When held rightly, sovereignty makes space for love to exist without chains. If he rises to devotion, it is not because you lured him, but because your presence demanded his shadow evolve. And if he does not, sovereignty ensures you remain unbroken, untouched by the collapse of his obsession. Psychologically, this is where projection dissolves. At first, he projected onto you the mother, the savior, the mirror of his own strength. When sovereignty returned, those illusions cracked. What remains is the chance for him to integrate his shadow and meet you as an equal, or to flee back into the patterns of control and possession. Either way, your throne holds. Sovereignty is not contingent on his choice. It is your own inheritance. The most haunting truth is this. When sovereignty is embodied, you no longer crave obsession. You no longer ache for him to prove his hunger. The thrill of being chased loses its intoxication. What once felt like power now feels like distraction. You begin to crave something rarer, something obsession can never provide: reverence without possession, devotion without chains, intimacy without collapse. This is the paradox that few dare to reach, because it requires outgrowing the hunger for proof that once defined you. And yet, this paradox is the culmination of the red thread, the prophecy whispered at the beginning. The cracked throne was never a warning of ruin, but a symbol of rebirth. It had to break so you could rebuild it in truth. The obsession he feels is not the destination, but the smoke rising from the fire that reforged you. The true destination is devotion, not his alone, but yours first. Devotion to yourself, to your sovereignty, to the throne that no shadow can unseat. From that devotion, everything else flows. But the final question waits like a locked door. If sovereignty frees you from obsession and transforms the way men see you, What will you choose when devotion finally appears? When a man stands before your throne not with hunger, but with reverence? Will you recognize it, or will the ghost of old wounds tempt you back into needing obsession to feel alive?